Thanks for joining us for episode 141 of the Clive Barker Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the works and worlds of Clive Barker. In this new episode, we, Jose and myself, Ryan, continue our coverage of the BBC TV show Clive Barker's A to Z of Horror and its companion book edited by Stephen Jones, as well as the recently completed Round 3 of the Duels of Blood. Did you vote? Tell us who your favorite and what you think about the matches so far, and who will win the final round. And round 4 is open for voting right now. Go vote. It's free and will only take a couple of minutes of your time. www.duelsofblood.com. DUELSOFBLOOD.com. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination Shop is dedicated to benefiting the Arts and Medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Please join us in donating to the program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's a link in the show notes for this episode and on the main website over at clivebarkercast.com. Just look at the big banner with his artwork on the right side. And that will take you where you need to go to get one of his prints or art books and help out with this wonderful program. Any friend of Clive Barker's is a friend of ours, and we thank him for his support. For news items, we really just have 2 for today, but they're pretty cool. If you remember the Leviathan, the Leviathan documentary. About, Leviathan, the story of Hellraiser and Hellbound Hellraiser 2, which the DVD is even longer than the title. The DVD was 11 hours long. But there's a companion book now, so you can buy a companion book to go along with that DVD, which is pretty cool. I hadn't heard if they'd done that with any of their other releases, but that's pretty neat.
I think they did something for a... what was the name of that movie? Shucks, I forgot. It's really well known. Not Evil Dead. The one with Don Calfa.
Return of the Living Dead?
Yes. I think they had made a book for that. The same team that was involved with Leviathan, or some of them had been involved with making a book about that movie. So I think this may be the second time they've done something like this. It looks really nice. It's going to be a coffee table companion book to the documentary. It's going to be available for pre-order this month, and it will be delivered apparently in July of this year. So it will be £24.99. So it's a British edition. So for you Brits out there listening, you should probably jump on this.
But just off the top of my head, I'm going to guess that's like $40 US, I think.
I guess I can just do a quick. We'll
see how right I was.
And the good thing is, there's no region locking for books, so it's not.
Right.
It's not something that you have to be concerned. Well, you have to be concerned with the shipping expenses.
Yeah.
It's $32.28.
Oh, okay. That's even. It used to be really easy because it used to be £1 equaled $2 American, so it was super easy to figure out. That was like 20 years ago, though.
Yeah, so the Cult Screenings UK, which is one of the production companies that did Leviathan, announced that due to issues with the Fright Night book, we had to push this back a while. Anyhow, it's nearly ready. 230 full-color pages, hundreds of behind-the-scenes photos from the cast and crew archives, exclusive artwork, foreword by the creator of Pinhead, Jeff Portis, afterword by Hellraiser historian Paul Kane, who has been on the podcast with us a few times, the interviews from the doc, cover art by Graham Humphreys, which is a beautiful cover art. It's got Pinhead and Clive Barker and all the, Julia and Frank and all the Cenobites are there with Chenard. Limited to 1,000 copies, exclusive to Cult Screenings, and written by Christian Sellers and Gary Smart. Again, Gary Smart was with us maybe a couple of times, maybe 3 times. I don't know. The complete history.
I wonder if you can get it autographed.
Oh, I'm sure you can probably ask them. Yeah. And it says here, written by Christian Sellers and Gary Smart, who also wrote the complete history of the Return of the Living Dead.
There we go.
So there we go. Celebrate 30 years of Hellraiser, tearing your soul apart very soon. That's wonderful. It's a great great opportunity. There's some little pictures that you can see from some of the page layouts, and they look amazing. They look very, very illustrated throughout.
Yeah. I'm debating if I want to pre-order that or not. I'm not sure yet. But it'd be kind of nice.
Well,
it'll be sort of like the Hellraiser Chronicles in a way.
I think this is a great opportunity because if it's limited to 1,000 copies, it's going to be pretty popular. Hellraiser is pretty popular, and Leviathan kind of put Hellraiser a little bit more on the map.
Yeah.
I think some people may think, oh, I doubt that. But it's like, no, trust me. I mean, those sequels were bringing Hellraiser down. And I think that this documentary really gave Hellraiser a much-needed boost in popularity, especially around the fandom community. So.
Yeah, to remind people, hey, this is really what Hellraiser is about, is these first two movies.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially not the last, 6.
Oh, and I'm looking at comments on their Facebook page, and they also say there are expanded interviews through in-depth research, and the narrative is different.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Wow, so there's even more stuff than what was the 11-hour documentary.
230 pages, so I think as soon as this pre-order opens, I'm going to be one of the first in line to get one.
So what would you think would be if you were to pick a Clive Barker movie to get a 4K restoration, which one would you pick?
I'd probably go with Nightbreed.
Yeah.
Just because Hellraiser has a 2K restoration already.
Yeah. And
Lord of Illusions is already has a decent restoration for the director's cut. But I think Nightbreed, it's complicated because Nightbreed came out in a complicated way when they did the director's cut. For example, the Blu-ray doesn't have 5.1 digital surround sound on the director's cut, which is brought by a limitation caused by using the 2.0 English track and the VHS audio that they got from the work print, so they couldn't even make a 5.1 track. But, what I'm trying to say is I think Nightbreed could still benefit from getting a decent transfer, and that would be my dream Blu-ray to have, would be a director's cut of Nightbreed as a 4K restoration.
Well, almost as good. There's a Rawhead Rex 4K transfer that just came out, and the theatrical.
Oh yeah. Kino Lorber Studio Classics did an announcement.
This is the first time I'd heard of that company, so I don't. Do they do typically limited run, super high resolution?
No, they just do kind of classic restorations of movies. Especially, I'm more familiar with Kino. Yeah. Kino used to be a big company, and apparently now they're. I'm not. Probably some people out there who are Blu-ray fanatics and DVD collectors are going to be like, "No, you've never heard of Kino Lorber? Oh my God!" It's like I honestly haven't. I've only heard of Kino. And Eureka and Arrow and things like that. But I haven't really bought any Kino Lorber classics. I guess I'm going to buy the first one. Yeah. It's going to be Rawhead Rex.
Me too. I mean, I definitely want to get this one because what I have right now is a Region 2. Well, it's a UK region-free version of Rawhead Rex.
Region 3?
Region free. It was.
Oh, free, yeah Region 0. Right.
It was so cheap that they didn't bother to region lock it.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
And the transfer is terrible. It looks like a transfer, it looks like a Laserdisc transfer or something like that. It does,
yeah. And there's a North American version, but it's been out of print for so long that it's like $100 if you try to buy it on eBay.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same quality.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm kind of happy with the one I have now, but I think that would be really cool to have, as long as they can still play on a 1080p system like I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to bring some of these movies back as a limited theatrical release. I'm not sure how limited it's going to be.
Wow. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, I can't imagine that Rawhead Rex is coming to Fairbanks, Alaska, but if it does, I'll go watch it, probably by myself.
Well, they say coming this summer to theaters from Kino Lorber repertory over 20 markets. And this fall on special edition DVD and Blu-ray from Kino Lorber Studio Classics, just in time for Halloween. Brand new 4K restoration starring David Dukes, Kelly Piper, Hugh O'Connor, Cora Venus Lunny, Ronan Wilmot, and Niall Toybin. Screenplay by Clive Barker. I guess he would have a word to say about that.
Yeah.
Directed by George Pavlou. So,
wow.
Yep. I asked them on their comments, what region will this be? Because I think it's American, because their releases usually are American. But I asked that comment, but nobody replied.
Yeah.
And someone asked, Rick Humphreys asked, interesting, will Clive Barker be interviewed for the disc? And Kino Lorber replied to this comment. They said, we very much hope so. We will be reaching out to him.
I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of positive things to say about Rawhead Rex.
Yeah, and then someone else says, I hope he will do an interview, but I've heard he wasn't too pleased with the way the film came out. That's understatement, right? Yeah.
Well,
and it seems like they already have some stuff as extras, because someone says, I have a nice 35mm US trailer if needed. And Kino Lorber Studio Classics replied, thanks, we already have the trailer and the radio spot. So they're probably going to introduce some extra content on this.
Well, that's cool, because I think as far as I know, no DVD had any extras at all, from what I knew. I mean, I don't think so.
Oh, my God. I saw another comment here. It says, Maximilian Gaylor Kale says, probably one of the most requested horror Blu-rays of the century. Thank you.
That's a joke, right?
I think he's being sarcastic, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a great, great comment there.
Yeah.
And our friend David, who joined us once in the podcast, he also did a lot of cool, funny comments. Right now I can't find them. I didn't save them, but he did some funny comments. So here's a shout out to David.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I think this will be. They might as well do. Actually, they should have done Transmutations and Rawhead Rex together in a double pack.
Sure.
Because Transmutations probably won't sell very well on its own.
Yeah, I guess it's not. I guess it'll sell as good as Rawhead Rex. Although Rawhead Rex has the added, interest of being an adaptation from a story of the Books of Blood, which obviously right off the bat is going to draw the attention of Clive Barker fans. Not so much Transmutations.
And Rawhead Rex has a coherent story that you can follow.
Yes.
And Transmutations doesn't really.
A coherent thread line for the most part, except when they get to that trailer park and it's just monsters and boobies and people screaming.
Yeah, right. But you can follow. I mean, it's like there's a monster on the loose, and it's eating children, and they need to figure out how to stop it.
I'm really happy about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the movie's not that good, but it's like I said in my post, my love for cinema and obscure movies, agrees with salvaging movies in the transition from VHS, Laserdisc to DVD, and beyond that to Blu-ray. I don't like the idea of the movies being left behind. This movie only exists as like some sort of VHS rip that someone made, or there's only this version of the Laserdisc transfer that's not even anamorphic or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, I don't like it when that happens. I think there were a lot of people who worked in that thing, and especially for this one, it's a movie that has a certain cult following, even though it's bad. So I'm happy that it's doing the transition to Blu-ray.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we can talk about it, when it comes out.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Maybe we'll make another commentary track for it.
Right.
Say, you can see the wires in this 4K restoration right there.
Right. You can see the light bulbs in his eyes.
Yeah, the LEDs or whatever. Yeah. I don't think there were LEDs at the time, but so it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's a fun monster movie, and it's going to get maybe a bit of an overkill 4K restoration, but hey, why not? The technology is there. We can do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
So, our Kickstarter update. This is for the backers and people waiting on stuff. We've had some kind of ups and downs with the iPhone app. It was actually finished. I know neither one of us got to run it or look at it, but Apple rejected it from the App Store. So what ended up happening? Go ahead.
Yeah, they had some concerns, right?
Yeah, they said first concern was that it's only stuff you can get off of the web, and so I contacted the people who were making it. I'm like, hey, all you guys do is make apps for podcasts. So how do you get around this? Because I mean, it seems to me that that should be a no-brainer if you've already gotten apps through the App Store. And then their second thing was they said like you're leveraging Clive Barker, which is a kind of a vague thing to say. And, it could mean that we're tricking people into thinking we are Clive Barker, or it could mean like you're just trying to use Clive Barker's name. Like there's a thing that people do on podcasts where they spam names of popular guests to get them higher up in the rankings. Like they'll put in the author tag on a podcast like Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and people who are popular. Zig Ziglar died, but these are people that are popular like for entrepreneurs and stuff.
Okay.
So they just put them in the metadata to get their podcasts up in the rankings, and they're kind of thinking like, oh, it just seems to me that you're leveraging Clive Barker. Maybe they're thinking we're just putting his, spamming his name onto this.
Yeah, but we're called the Barker Cast. I mean, the long form title is the Clive Barker Podcast, not the Clive Barker Podcast.
Right.
Because that was your idea. It was like, we're going to be the Clive Barker Podcast for people who like Clive Barker.
Yeah.
And that's why, our website is clivebarkercast.com and our Twitter handle is BarkerCast to make it more simple. So our app would be called BarkerCast.
Yeah. And that was the other thing. The developer kind of made a mistake because they put the name as the Clive Barker Podcast, and I think maybe we would have made it through. I don't know. I mean, maybe they wouldn't have had that objection if the name had been right to begin with. So I
guess at this point, everybody knows that we're not really Clive Barker making a podcast.
Yeah.
I wish there was a Clive Barker podcast. Gosh, I would listen to it like religiously.
Yeah. Well, and this whole thing got started because I was hoping that there would be something like this for me to listen to, and there wasn't.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we could do this.
So they're working on it. Yeah. They're going to change the name, and we got some sort of permission from Seraphin stating that they allow us to call our podcast BarkerCast, and so hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, I was a little humbled by how fast Clive Barker signed that letter for us. I thought that was that made me feel really good, I guess. That's the opposite of humbled, isn't it? I guess I was
happy.
Yeah, I was
proud
happy about it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of like a little bit of a sanction there by Clive Barker in a way, which is always nice to feel like someone is interested in your work that you're doing, promoting them. So that's great. So those apps will be coming out soon. We're just working out those kinks.
Yeah, and I've been. The other part, of course, the hardcover book, I finished up the Mad Monster Party episode. I think we talked about that last time, and I've been I've gotten 10 minutes done of the Simon Bamford interview, which is our episode 6. He was our first ever interview, so you and I were both super nervous for that one.
Yeah. I remember one of the most nervous that I was when we were going to interview Russell Charrington for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote down all these questions, and we were like deciding, you're going to ask this question, and then I'll ask that question. And then when we started, it kind of started getting a little off key, and I was like, I don't know what question I'm going to ask now. I was just walking back and forward with a big cabled mic connected to my computer.
Oh, wow. And
I was just pacing around. Yeah.
The first ones I ever did, or the ones I was the most nervous about, were the in-person ones at the convention, like Ann Bobby and Mike Sheffer and Tony Todd. I just felt like, oh God, there's people waiting in line behind me. These people are gonna, I'm doing it in person. They're just probably, getting annoyed and impatient with me, and I don't know. I just felt really self-conscious and strange about it.
Yeah. I guess the best thing to do is just get in line, get your autograph, talk to them, ask them if you can do an interview with them later, and then meet up with them and do an interview later, which was kind of like what I did. Yeah, when I had the chance to see the Nightbreed Cabal cut with Russell and Bobby, that's kind of what happened. I was in an empty room with them, helping to set up the whole thing, and we're just like, hey, talking to Ann Bobby, buying some of her autograph pictures, and talking to Russell about the posters and stuff. And then we did the screening. Everything went well. We took some pictures, and then we all went to this restaurant, sports bar at the hotel. And that's when, we had a few drinks, and Russell had some clam chowder in a bread bowl.
Yeah.
And we just did a quick interview with my cell phone. And that's how we did it. And I just realized that I don't think that interview is in the list. So I'm going to add that one to the list because the Occupy Midnight on location that we did at Burlingame, California.
That's right.
I'm going to put that.
I think those didn't make the list because I had assumed most of them were like Q&A sessions, and a lot of them were Q&A sessions recorded by other people. So I think there were a few of them snuck in there that you and I actually had been to.
Yeah, so that one is actually pretty good quality, so it should be easy for me to translate that one. I'll see if I can work on that one tonight. And,
we got to get that back into the list, or get that into the list so we can...
Yeah, and as soon as I'm done with the Nicholas Vince, I'm going to move on to that one, and then we're going to go down the list that we have on OneNote. So this is just a lot of work to do, and it may take a little while, but we're gonna get that hardcover book done.
And once we have all these interviews transcribed, then we're going to be cutting them apart and putting pieces in different places and formatting and a lot of it is, related to Hellraiser, and a lot of it's not related to anything, in these books. And so we just got to... And
we'll be also designing the cover a little more, because we did some mock-up cover ideas. But, we obviously have to come up with several mock-ups, because then we have to talk to some of the people that are doing the book and maybe get their formatting opinion, because I've never done a book like this. So I think there's some format guidelines that you have to format the text and the pages and the cover and all that stuff so they can print everything together. But I guess we'll worry about that when we get there. For now, we're just transcribing.
Yeah. So let's see. I guess that's kind of it for the Kickstarter for right now. It's just going to be kind of a long slog through these transcribing the interviews, and then we can actually start the fun, creative part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to hear back from the people who got their posters from us, especially the Do Not Trust the Smiling World that I shipped. I think I shipped 7 of those.
Yeah.
And I know you got yours, so I'm assuming everybody in the U.S. got theirs. But there's another friend of ours, friend of the show, who lives in the UK. So I have a tracking number here, and I have to put it in and see if he already received it and contact him about it. So, I guess I'll be doing that today.
Yeah, we'll see how that went. Hopefully everybody got them.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess let's start with the Duels of Blood, and then we can go into the A through Z of horror. So it's a little shorter now, of course. Duels of Blood. So round 3 is over. And we have our winners. In the Aberrat bracket, this is duelsofblood.com, DUELSOFBLOOD, duelsofblood.com. In the Aberrat bracket, Malingo versus Mendel and Shape, we had Malingo didn't make it. Wow. That's surprising.
Oh, wow.
I thought, okay, I mean, I like Mendelsohn Shape, but he didn't last very long in this story.
Malingo can be a little annoying sometimes because he's such a simpleton as a character,
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a simpleton. Yeah. He's kind of like a humanoid pet in a way, right?
Yeah. So, wow, we've got Mendelsohn Shape moves on to round 4. And Candy Quackenbush versus Princess Breath, it's Candy by 71% of the votes.
Candy. What a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's going to echo the the books in a way, because Mendelssohn Shape does square off against Candy, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. So the whole Aberrat bracket next round is going to be, well, actually, as you're listening to this, you'll be able to vote. Candy Quackenbush versus Mendelssohn Shape.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting match. I think Mendelssohn Shape has a handicap here because obviously Candy is the main protagonist of Aberrat. But hey, vote away, people. Yeah. You can make Mendelssohn Shape win. Team Mendelssohn Shape for the win. Yeah. I like Candy too, but I don't like predictable results.
Yeah. And the Magica bracket, Hapexamendios versus Quasar. Hapexamendios beat Quasar by quite a bit.
Yeah. Right. 66% of the votes. 2/3 went to Hapexamendios. The one god that makes everything easier to pray. Yeah. So goodbye, Quasar. I always like Judith better anyway. So
yeah, that's true. Quasar was a little bit crazy and sad. Yeah,
she was very, very depressed. Yeah. And then you have Piopa versus the Nulianak. Piopa won. Yeah. So, again, something that's going to reflect the books. Hapexamendios is going to square off against Piopa on the next round.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of interesting how this is working out that way. And now we've got... of course, now I say that in the art bracket, Kissoon versus Harry D'Amour. Of course, I think everybody could have predicted Harry D'Amour beat Kissoon with 82% of the votes.
Scarlet Gospels.
Yeah.
Very happy about this, and he got a lot of votes too, 82%.
Yeah. I think Harry D'Amour is a much more interesting, better character. Definitely more relatable.
You do have on Everville. You do have the history of Kissoon, and if you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But Kissoon's life is it's a pretty hard life growing up, and then there's this period that we have no knowledge of, but apparently he might have belonged to the Shoal. So I would love to know more about that. I was wondering if Clive is going to show us a little more of how the Shoal used to be like in his third book of the Art. That would be an interesting flashback, I would say.
Yeah, so somehow they guarded the world against the invasion of the Ead.
Mm-hmm.
And then Raoul versus Zerapushu. So the Zerapushu beat Raoul.
So a squid bit a monkey.
Yeah, and
I'm surprised because Zerapushu is kind of an abstract character. It's not really doesn't have any lines. It's just there swimming in quiddity. And Raoul is a very sympathetic character. I thought he was going to win for sure, but I guess not.
Yeah, and the Zerapushu are sort of like a hive mind spirit pilots sort of a thing.
Yeah.
A connection to the divine.
In that regard, they're very poetic.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting battle, Harry D'Amour versus Zerapushu. I think I probably can predict, that Harry's going to win that one. But
Zerapushu got as many votes almost as Harry D'Amour. They are only deferred for one vote. Yeah. That Harry got 28 and Zerapushu got 27. Yeah. So I'm surprised that so many people voted for Zerapushu.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I should have voted more for Raoul. I only voted once for each character.
Oh.
In the Books of Blood bracket, we have the Chat from Lost Souls versus Jacqueline S. Mm-hmm. And Jacqueline S. won.
Yeah, and Jacqueline S. There's been a lot more talk about her as a character and that story lately because of the Almost movie. And Chat really just exists in an obscure short story that didn't make it into the Books of Blood.
And a comic book story.
Yeah, that's right.
Comic book apparition, I should say.
Yeah.
So, Jacqueline S. Again, I think she in the last year's Duels of Blood?
Yes. Yeah, she was.
Okay. She also went pretty far, right?
I think so. Take a look here
real
quick.
rooting for Jacqueline S. to make it to the final round.
Yeah.
And then we had in the second match of the Books of Blood bracket, we have Mahogany versus the Madonna, and Mahogany won. Mahogany grabbed his hammer and bludgeoned the Madonna to death, apparently. So, yes, Mahogany won with 3/4 of the vote. A great character played by Vinnie Jones in the movie adaptation. I can see why people would vote for him because he's a much more striking picture than a formless blob of blue jello like the Madonna.
Yeah.
So I guess, so it's going to be Jacqueline S. versus Mahogany, and a very interesting match.
And actually, Jacqueline S. Only made it to round 2 last year. She got beaten really badly by the city of Popolac.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would trump anything, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so next round is going to be round 4, and it's going to be Mendelssohn Shape versus Candy Quackenbush, Hepexamendios versus Piopa. Yeah. In the art bracket, it's going to be Zarapushu versus Harry D'Amour. And in the Books of Blood bracket, we're going to have my favorite match, which is going to be Jacqueline S. versus Mahogany.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if that were a fight, it would probably Jacqueline S. would win, right? I mean,
if it was the real characters squaring off, yes, I believe that Jacqueline S. would probably turn Mahogany into like a piece of furniture.
Right. I mean, he seems to be super strong and having probably have his life's been extended and stuff, but in the end, you can't compare to her superpowers.
Could have gone either way. I mean, also if Chat had won and would be winning against the Madonna, that would be an interesting match too, because it'd be a demon versus like kind of not a goddess, but I don't know exactly what the Madonna is supposed to be, like this female archetypal creature of sorts. So that would have been interesting too.
Yeah, some kind of fertility goddess of some.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting, and of course, as you're listening to this, you can vote right now to get started. And I like all of those characters, actually. I mean, I don't think that there are any. You know, like last year we had CD got really far. CD Cenobite got really far, and we were kind of shocked but
it was a freak thing.
Yeah. But in this case, these are all fun characters. You know, making their way into round 4.
Someone was trolling the Duels of Blood last year for sure when CD made it all the way to like round 4 or something.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So you can vote every 5 minutes. You can pick your favorite Clive Barker character and vote for them every 5 minutes. And, you know, if you want to vote for your favorite character, invest some time in it and see the score go up.
Yeah. That's one thing I did want to mention, that we had a much bigger turnout last year, and maybe because we used more recognizable characters. You know, these are all literary characters instead of movie.
Well, you know, sequels always get less audience than the main thing. So, you know, last year was a novelty Duels of Blood, and this year it's like Duels of Blood 2. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to start using like colons and be like Duels of Blood: The Return.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the Books of Blood, so Volume 1 and Volume 2.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we can go all the way to Volume 6.
Yeah, right. And then after that, who knows? And actually, it's kind of the same thing with our fundraisers, right? We've got Fundraiser 2 and Fundraiser. Clive Barker Podcast presents Fundraiser 2, and then we did Fundraiser 3,
Hell on Earth,
and Fundraiser 4, Blood Money instead of Bloodlines, and then...
Yeah, we should have called the second one... Yeah, we should have called the second one Hellbound.
Well, I think Clive Barker Podcast presents Fundraiser 2 was so long that I just didn't,
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah, but then where do you go after Fundraiser 4? I was thinking like Fundraising Inferno, maybe. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's better than what I was going to say, which is going to be the return of the son of Fundraiser.
Right.
The Return of the Son of the Bride of Fundraiser.
Yeah.
I can't go any deeper than that.
Yeah. Yeah, then where do you go after that one? Of course,
well,
every year it's kind of like, every year we just think about what we're doing right now, and we don't think about, like, how is this going to affect the future?
Well, eventually you can go to Fundraiser 10, Judgment. Let's hope we make it.
Yeah,
so
Fundraiser 10.
that'd be
Yeah.
Fundraiser X, Judgment. And I know I keep bringing up the X because I just like that so much. I like it when movies went all the way to like a 10th sequel or 9th sequel, and then you would get like
Jason
X would be part of like, Jason X, yeah. That was the Duels of Blood, and now we're going to go into the A to Z of horror.
Yeah.
Have you guys been watching the videos? Have you guys been watching the playlist that we put up?
Yeah.
Let us know.
And in this case, one of the letters, just like last time, one of the letters did not get represented by the videos.
Mm-hmm.
So we have J, K, and L, and L is not in the videos. L for Lynch Mob.
Right.
Yeah. But we'll get into that one. But we can start with J for Japan first.
Sure. And I thought for sure this was going to talk more about Godzilla.
Yeah.
But no, it talks more about Tetsuo.
Yeah. And I watched Tetsuo because of I thought I hadn't seen it before. And when I watched it, I was like, oh, yeah, I have seen this, but it's kind of opaque and impenetrable. I understand the premise and everything because, this A to Z of horror, lays out the idea and interviews with the creator and stuff. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's just not for me.
I saw Tetsuo back in the 90s.
Yeah, I think I did.
And it was a very strange movie. It was kind of like a mixture of, first of all, it's in black and white.
Yeah.
From what I recall.
And there's a lot of close-ups on gore special effects, but of machines stabbing into skin, but it's kind of hard to see what's going on in it. I mean, maybe that's just because I watched it on YouTube.
Okay. Well, the movie was directed by Shinya Tsukamoto, and it's this movie that kind of it's a mixture of maybe Eraserhead with something out of a Cronenberg universe.
Yeah.
Where it's this guy who one day discovers after a car crash that his body starts melding with machinery.
Yeah.
That's what I recall, and he starts growing cables out of his skin and stuff like that, and his body starts mutating, and apparently one of the first versions of this story was when Tsukamoto did a theater play where a guy a central character would develop a bizarre affinity with electric cables. It was called The Adventures of Denchu Kozo. So I don't know what that means. Do you know what Denchu Kozo means?
Denchu probably has something to do with electricity.
Okay.
But yeah,
and Kozo, Kozo.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just some name or some sort of suffix. Anyway, so yeah, very strange movie, and throughout like you said, very obscure. And what was the word you used? Impenetrable.
Yeah, opaque, I guess. I mean, opaque. I think that it also reminded me a little bit of Clive Barker's The Forbidden. Because it's there's a lot of imagery, but not a lot of understanding the characters.
In some ways, it reminded me of Videodrome, the Cronenberg movie, because of the way that technology kind of mixes with flesh, and you see James Woods grows a gun out of his hand, and it's got cables and stuff, and then he puts a videotape in his stomach, and this has sort of imagery like that, where one man kind of possesses another man after a car crash, and it just starts mutating this guy's physicality. And they keep cutting away. I remember the movie keeps cutting away to it looks like a guy inside kind of a womb or something.
Yeah.
There's he's inside this sort of an egg or a cocoon or something. Do you remember those parts?
Yeah, yeah. It reminded me of Akira, the animated movie. You know, the
Sure.
From Tetsuhiro Otomo, where there's actually the character Tetsuo is like, you know, evolving and mutating and turning into this gigantic blob that could take over the world.
Yeah. Well, Tsukamoto said, the director said, I was asking to myself, what would happen in a world where metal brains thought for themselves?
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting question, but I guess I don't really see that in the movie, to be honest. I see it more like it's more like a transhumanism kind of thing that's happening here. It's like he's not really a cyborg per se. It's more like something that grows out of him. His flesh starts turning into technology, and that kind of changes him. And in the end, you see this giant figure. He's like a tank.
Yeah.
And he's like a giant tank with an enormous body covered in like metal stuff. And he goes like, I forgot the last line of the movie, but he yells something out in Japanese.
It's something like,
let's kill.
We'll destroy the world with our love, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, Kameda, Madonna. It's like, you know what? There's a lot of screaming in this movie in Japanese. Yeah. And sometimes you have no idea what they're saying if you didn't have the subtitles. And I think I may have seen it first without subtitles, and that was really, really obscure for me because I had no idea what was going on. That was literally like watching a David Lynch black and white movie for me.
Yeah, right. Right, yeah, Eraserhead is kind of similar in that way. It's like, what is this about?
Yeah, yeah.
But it was, I mean, in the book, in the interviews, they talk about that it's about the encroachment of the cities on people, and the cities are kind of taking over people's lives, and cities and technology. And
I guess that's true for Tokyo, right? I mean, did you visit Tokyo?
I never made it there because of the earthquake. So I got to go. I was in Kobe, and I got to go to Osaka and Kyoto, but I never made it to Tokyo. I really wanted to go there, but the rail system was down.
Mm-hmm. Well, he talks about an earthquake here. It might have been talking about Kobe, but he did talk about that the people who live in the city bring about its destruction. Tetsuo is a simple story about a man who turns into metal. I've taken an extreme point of view by asking what would happen if humans turn into metal. Yeah. And, you know, okay, that's cool and all, but it seems like this director, when he was talking in the video segments, it just seems like he's just – maybe something's lost in translation. But I feel like the questions that he comes up with are not that interesting to me.
Well, and the issue that I have is that it's more like you take a crazy premise, right, and make a movie out of it at the expense of having believable or interesting characters.
Yeah. Yeah, because it just becomes more of an art house film, really.
Yeah, exactly.
He mentions a few things, like in the end when the Tetsuo character has a giant body and he's like a tank, and you see him like really going fast forward through the streets of the city with a giant arm with a gun. Yeah. And he says something about this that kind of reflects on Godzilla. He said that Godzilla has this enormous body, and it's like this black body, and it represents death. And so at the end of Tetsuo, he wanted the Tetsuo monster, the Iron Man, to also have an enormous body, an enormous black body that would represent this death going through the city and destroying it. So I guess, yeah, Godzilla did kind of seep into his visual references for this film.
I was kind of hoping that J for Japan would have a little bit more about Godzilla. I mean, Clive Barker even was asked at one point to make the Godzilla 1998 movie, and I think he passed on it, but...
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he could have written it...
It would have been completely different from what we got now.
Sure. I mean, just like The Mummy that he wrote with Mick Garris, how that would have turned out. Speaking of which, do we have that story? Do we have that No. Yeah, we should try getting our hands on that. The Mummy.
Yeah. I mean, and actually, I'd like to hear. We don't get a whole lot of feedback, so I'd like to know what people think about when we talk about these scripts that otherwise are not typically available.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, David will give us his feedback on it and stuff. But I'd be curious because we did all those Hellraiser ones, and we talked about the Great Unknown, the first Harry D'Amour story. So it'd be interesting. Do people appreciate the? I mean, if it were me, I think I would have loved to hear about these scripts that otherwise have just been kind of locked away.
Right. Well, luckily, our podcast has been bringing a lot of these scripts back into discussion. So, hey, it's great. It gives us a little bit of a hook and gives us a little bit of an exclusive thing to talk about that not many people out there will know. So, yeah, let's see if we can find some more of those things, thanks to our friends at Seraphin. Yeah. And maybe we can bring some more discussion of other obscure scripts that never got made.
Yeah.
Did we ever discuss – I think we discussed the Hellraiser 3 unfilmed script, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, we did the one with the pinhead and the
bordello.
Yeah, we talked about that one. We didn't talk at length. We didn't actually read the Egypt version of it. We talked briefly about it, I think, in Films That Never Were, or maybe
sure.
a Hellraiser 3 episode, but
yeah, and we don't really have that script of the Egypt one anyway. Yeah. We just had like what was written in Revelation. So
yeah.
Anyway, so that leads us to K for Killing Joke, which talks about something that Clive Barker loves to talk about, which is the theater of the Grand Guignol in Paris.
So this went all the way until 1962. So that means Clive Barker was just a little kid when it stopped. But the amount that he talks about it, it seems like he must have seen it at some point.
Well, he likes the tradition of it, I guess.
Yeah.
The tradition of the Grand Guignol, because let me just go and get one of his theater playbooks, and I'll quote something from there, because I think he talks about that in the introduction to one of his theater plays. I'm going to go get it real quick. Okay, so I got the book. It's in Incarnations, 3 plays by Clive Barker. If you go to the production notes for Frankenstein in Love, which is basically a Grand Guignol play, that's what it is. Mm. He talks about it, and he says that the props, he talks about the props in the production notes. He says that in the Grand Guignol tradition, they are of no little importance. So he tells people that, it's good to have good props in this show because they need to be believable. And, he also talks about the play, and it's subtitled The Grand Guignol Romance, Frankenstein in Love. And he says, don't be fooled into thinking that the piece is best mounted as dark kitsch. It can be a good deal more than that if the project is approached with sufficient seriousness of intention. In its obsessive way, the play creates a kind of alternative world where everybody's corrupted or corrupt, dead or dying, monstrous in form, deed, or both. A fantasia, if you will, on taboo themes, which refuses to offer much in the way of comfort to its audience. In the singularity of intention lies both its limitation and its potential for theatrical power. This is something he wrote for production notes, and I think that describes the Grand Guignol Theater perfectly.
Yeah. Because
that's the tradition of it, is that it was very visceral, very like horrible theater, where at the Pigalle, which is the area in Paris where it used to stand, and it stood there for 65 years, the Grand Guignol Theater was actually built or occupying the same building that used to be a chapel. So I think that's amazing right there, right?
Yeah.
It was opened by Oscar Métainier, who was a guy who in his early years he would accompany men who were about to be executed. And if you know France, you know that for a long time, well into the 20th century, the guillotine was still used to execute prisoners, So, that's kind of a weird thing to be the guy who walks the dead man walking into his final meet with the guillotine.
And I think that if that were me, I would probably prefer to not deal with violence or want to reenact violence, in my spare time.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't bring the stress home with you.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think he liked it. I think he liked it because he not only created the Grand Guignol Theater, He also put it on a deconsecrated church, like I said, like a chapel. It was one of the smallest theaters in Paris. It only had 293 seats. But, of course, this led to very intimate performances. But, you know, I bet that place must have been great. I mean, I looked at some pictures of it, and it looked amazing. There were, like, angels over the orchestra pit left over from the church, from the time when it was a church. And the boxes where people would sit there to watch the shows, they looked like confessionals.
Yeah.
And what's really weird and kind of nasty is that some of these would have like a mesh window, and people would get so impressed by the performances that they were seeing in the theater, where, you know, eyes were being gouged and women were being raped on stage, or, you know, in the context of the play, obviously.
Yeah.
And then people were being strangled, and there was fake blood everywhere. I wonder if there was a splash zone.
Yeah,
there must have been something like that.
Like Guar.
But some of these people, probably someone with a less peaceful mind, a little bit more disturbed, they would rent these little boxes, and they would go in there with their friends or liaisons, I would say. And sometimes they would have to clean some nasty fluids off the bottom of those boxes while the theater was going on, because they were getting off on the violence that was being shown on them on stage. So
and nobody could see what was going on in those boxes except for the performers on the stage. And I think they'd said sometimes they would yell up to them like, "Oh, I hope you're having fun in there."
Yeah, or like, "Keep it down."
Yeah.
You know. So very strange theater. But I guess the boxes looking like confessionals probably made the Grand Guignol's brutal and realistic performances more cathartic in a way, because at least when you go into a confessional, you expect some measure of like shredding your sins and becoming a little more cleansed in a way. So I don't know if that was something that people felt. Those boxes, some of them were originally built for nuns to watch the service in seclusion. Again, that poor church, man. That church saw some things.
Yeah, well, and also the roof was leaky, and so when there was blood going all over the stage, sometimes the rain would leak in and onto the audience, and they would think that the blood was raining down on their heads. Yeah.
In some ways, this reminded me of, when in America, drive-in theaters and even theaters were doing this thing where they were showing movies like The Tingler, and the movies that broke the fourth wall, and then theater owners would come up with ideas to, hire people on with makeup to walk down the aisles of the theater and scare patrons, people, it's like, the Tingler is loose. Yeah. Scream for your lives. And someone would be screaming. They would start off a scream, and then everybody would start screaming. And I'm guessing that must have been kind of like a drive-in experience of the Grand Guignol adapted to like American audiences a little bit. Ultimately, the book says that part of this Grand Guignol tradition may have spawned or evolved into the current horror movies that we have. Because that makes kind of sense, right? People like to be scared. They like to see blood, and they like to see, like, some people, I mean, not everybody. Some people can't stand that. I mean, some people faint when they see blood, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. To me, this kind of seems like, it just kind of seems like Guar is now. Where they're decapitating people on stage and aiming
decapitating a Sarah Palin mannequin.
or Barack Obama, or probably they would be doing Donald Trump right now, and they just point the next dump at the audience, so that it continuously sprays blood all over the whole audience.
So I know you're a big War fan. You probably saw them live a few times.
Yeah.
Is there a splash zone? Do people have, like, ponchos?
The whole concert is a splash zone.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean,
that's awesome.
They have high pressure hoses that spray out like hundreds of gallons of fake blood.
Oh my God!
It soaks the whole theater.
That is amazing. Well, and let's not forget that back in 2013. Clive was in a exhibition called the Grand Guignol, right? He was in Clive Barker Presents Grand Guignol Thanatos exhibition at the Century Guild back in 2013. So, and it was Clive Barker and a few other artists being presented there. So, I had a great poster for that one.
Yeah, that's right. So I think if the Grand Guignol was around now, I probably wouldn't go see it. I mean, I would want to see Frankenstein in Love. But, I don't know. Just something about seeing people getting their eyes gouged out, or I don't know. This kind of bothers me.
There was always a fascination with this sort of thing. I mean, even art house movies like, what's the name of that movie where there's an eyeball being sliced? It's at the tip of my tongue. It's a surrealist movie, Un Chien Andalou. A surrealist film by Luis Buñuel. Even that one has like a scene where an eyeball is being sliced, and it's great special effect right there. But it's disturbing. And I remember, I don't know if this is a thing here, but tabloids, in a way, crime tabloids and real life crimes documentaries, they kind of ride on that tradition a little bit. When you see these TV shows that are playing all the time, Unsolved Mysteries, Making a Murderer, or Killing Fields. Well, not Killing Fields, but Cold Justice or whatever. Those shows that are based on true stories. Yeah. And they say, that's kind of a little bit like people want to know, this guy killed his girlfriend and then he stuffed her body in a fridge and then, all this stuff. And sometimes they recreate these things, and you usually have this kind of retired sheriff narrating. And this guy, I went to see him in his house and he was sitting there and he just looked like he was not human, and I just put his cuffs on, and it was and basically that's what it is. I remember I used to have a family relative of mine, a brother of my grandfather. He used to buy this newspaper, this tabloid crime newspaper, that all it did was just, get pictures taken at morgues and stuff, and they would cover the murders that happened, and sometimes they would be they have a picture of the body in the morgue and they put it on the front page. And it's I always thought that thing was garbage, and everybody, everybody in their right minds thinks, that's a slummy tabloid. But for some reason that appealed to my great uncle. And he would buy that and read it, and he'd be like, hey, look what happened. Oh, my God, this guy got killed, and then they pulled his intestines out. And I'd be like, I don't want to know. Yeah. I don't want to know about it. But sometimes people do that. People have this kind of idea. I mean, there's people who go on the internet and they look at, the ISIS beheadings and stuff like that. And it's stuff I wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole, But it's people go and they watch it, and they're like, oh, my God, did you see it? You got to see it. Yeah. I'm like, no, I don't.
When I was a kid, do you remember those Faces of Death videos? They were sort of.
I've heard of it.
They were sort of like the super taboo. Oh man, you got to see the Faces of Death, and
it's banned in 53 countries or whatever.
And I refused to watch them because I didn't want to see real people getting killed. I mean, and I had friends describing stuff to me, but I found out later that I think it was fake. But
I think a lot of that was just security footage and footage that was from actual accidents and stuff that happened. But I mean, gosh, just the other day, a guy died here in Arizona, and he died in a what's it called? It was a meat factory. It was a grinder. The guy fell into a grinder. He died almost instantaneously. Oh. Yeah. And
there was one time on Facebook, this other realtor I know. He said, "Hey, everybody, watch your kids," and he posted this video of something that happened in Asia somewhere, of some little kid getting on the escalator top.
Oh my gosh,
going down to the second floor. He was climbing onto the railing, and then he just fell, and the camera followed this poor kid all the way down until he hit the ground, the floor down, and bounced and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, that's terrible.
It's man, I really wish I hadn't watched that, because that's haunting.
Right. Yeah. Just the other day, I unliked a page on Facebook because they had this base jumper on top of some tower, and some stupid page that I don't know why I liked it, It was like supposed to be just, psychedelic gifts or something. And one of them was just like a guy, a base jumper, slips, falls over the side of the building rail, and you just see him just go straight down. Some people say, oh, they caught it before he opened a parachute or something. But I was like, yeah, still not something I want to see when I'm scrolling through Facebook. So I just didn't like that page.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you post that? You're supposed to post like psychedelic gifts, not, people dying. But anyway, so one of the undisputed stars of this theater of the Grand Guignol, and they do have some video segments in the 4th episode of this show where they interview some people in a restaurant, some French actors from the Grand Guignol Theater. And one of them was this lady. She started working there in 1930-something, and she was 17 when she joined the cast of the theater, the Grand Guignol.
Yeah, right.
And it's just amazing. They're just reminiscing about it, and they're laughing. And the lady's really charismatic. And she's eating raw meat. I guess they call it steak tartare, I guess.
Yeah.
Where you just mix it in with some seasonings, and it's like it's not cooked meat. It's just freshly ground, and then they just eat it.
Yeah.
So, and she's talking about that and how they did the tricks. And another guy is there, an old gentleman, and he's saying, well, they would have this thing where it looks like a knife, but it's really like full of fake blood, and they would just squirt it, pretend to poke out my eye, and then it would just put some Vaseline with food dye and pretend like that was my eye just emptying itself out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it says here in the book that one of the undisputed stars of the theater of the Grand Guignol was an actress named Maxa, who the newspapers of the day dubbed as the High Priestess of the Temple of Horror. That's kind of a cool name to have. During her career, she is said to have been murdered more than 10,000 times in over 60 different ways, raped more than 3,000 times, and cried help nearly 1,000 times.
Yeah. And
that gives you an idea.
I think that this particular chapter is a good one to watch the episode of, because you can see all these people who are talking, and now they're older, in the 97 when this came out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that even those people in the 30s, they probably didn't see some of its heyday, I guess. But maybe they did, because it says here that during the World War II, the Nazis started attending the Grand Guignol Theater, and that kind of brought it down a bit, and that kind of brought it to its end. And one of the people that was working at the theater of the Grand Guignol mentioned that sometimes they would get Nazis come backstage to praise them for the play they did, and it was like, and they didn't know that I was in the Resistance.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's cool.
That's funny. Yeah.
But yeah, and they had said that that they didn't feel that people were kind of tired of horror and atrocity because of World War II. And that it kind of spoiled the Grand Guignol, and basically the enemy was going in there all the time, the Nazis, So
yeah.
if you like going to a place and you see a bunch of Nazis are going there, you probably go, never mind.
It's even said here that Field Marshal Goering of the Luftwaffe was a regular patron of the Grand Guignol during the early 40s. The occupying Nazi forces condemned the Grand Guignol, though, as degenerate art. So I guess once they decided to say, well, we don't like that. That's degenerate art. That's when Goering stopped attending. But for a while, he did attend the Grand Guignol Theater.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea of how much of a sick bastard Goering was.
Yeah.
Because he liked it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's a certain catharsis in watching horror movies, but there are people who legitimately like to see not just fake horror, but real violence. Yeah. So, yeah. That's what I'm trying to say here. Not that people who like horror movies are degenerates in any way. Obviously, right. That's not what I'm saying.
He could get his fill of it in real life and want to watch it for pretend as well.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, so the next one, we have L for Lynch Mob. And this one did not appear in the TV series, and I'm kind of wondering, and we'll have to ask Stephen Jones when we get a chance, Why this didn't appear in the TV series, I'm going to guess that this is kind of more of an American. This chapter really centers around American culture, and maybe that's why it didn't air on this BBC British TV series.
Right, that could be it.
But L for Lynch Mob is about racism and African American racial issues in horror cinema, and a lot of it, a surprising amount of it, was about this rap movement that I don't think that I was even aware of at the time.
Me neither.
Horror score, they called it, with the grave diggers, and I think there
was horrorcore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never heard of the grave diggers, but I was reading this and I discovered, RZA from Wu-Tang Clan was in the grave diggers. Back then, they called him Resurrector.
Yeah, right.
RZA Rector.
Resurrector, yeah.
Yeah, so that's funny to know that he started, or at least that he had like a role in the grave diggers, because I never heard of him, to be honest.
Yeah, and when they were talking about the lyrics for their rap songs about hanging yourself, I was kind of like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of, I wanted to watch a couple of these movies. Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight I didn't get a chance to watch, but what was the other one? Tales from the Hood. That was a Spike Lee produced movie, and I watched that. That was really good. I think that's up there with like Tales from the Crypt and Creepshow and stuff like that.
Right. Tales from the Hood. I haven't seen it. You told me about it. I looked up some things, and like you said, it was produced by Spike Lee. It's made in the horror anthology format, so it's got 4 little stories in there.
Yeah.
Kind of like the old Amicus anthologies, like The Vault of Horror or Tales from the Crypt or Asylum.
Yeah.
So there's a wraparound story, right? In some ways, it reminds me a little bit of
Quicksilver Highway.
Quicksilver Highway. Yes, thank you. Because there's a guy, 4 gangsters go into like a funeral home, right?
Yeah, and the funeral director had told him previously that he had some drugs that he found in the alley that he wanted to sell them. And so they get there and they're all impatient, they're like, show me the shit. And he's like just ignoring them and telling them the story of all these different bodies in these caskets.
Wow.
And they're getting angry and impatient, and he's like, oh, you just, hold on, I want to tell you this story, unless you're too scared. And there's and the wraparound story has a really cool conclusion that I don't want to spoil, because maybe a lot of people haven't. I don't know if how many people have seen that, but I think it's worth watching. I think it was really good.
Okay, that's cool. I was looking up Rusty Cundiff, who was the director, and I discovered that he was also a director on the Chappelle Show. And so this movie apparently has. Tackles a lot of obviously socially relevant issues. One of the stories, I think, is about the police beating up and killing this activist, right?
Yeah, and there's one story that is about a former Klan member who's a politician, and the guy's his first name is Duke. So it's
Duke. Like David Duke.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that story is called KKK Comeuppance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's a take on a killer doll kind of thing. So it reminds me of Puppet Master. When I saw the trailer for this, I was like, oh, that reminds me of Puppet Master in a way.
It is kind of like Puppet Master. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought, I'm not a big fan of rap music, so, there's a lot of rap music in the score, which is kind of like not my thing. But I thought it was a really well-made movie, and it was a lot better than what I expected.
And I think one of the stories in this movie there's like these crazy flashbacks that happen where they come up with actual graphic imagery of lynchings, again, which goes well with the theme of this chapter, which is called L for Lynch Mob. But I was like, those are real lynching pictures that he put in the movie. Wow.
It's about that story is actually a little bit like Clockwork Orange. There's a guy who is in prison, and these people come to him, and he's a hardened gangster killer guy, And these people come and say, hey, if you can do our social reprogramming program, if you can make it through that, you might have a chance to go free. And so he goes, and it's this crazy, like, castle-looking thing, and he's in a cage, and then they put these things over his eyes, and they flash images of gang killings, and they mix them in with images of like, lynchings and stuff. So the idea is like, hey, if you're killing other black people, you're no better than these, like, Klan members and stuff who are also killing black people. Right.
Yeah, that comes straight out of Clockwork Orange right there, that sort of imagery. But, yeah, it's weird. Now I'm curious to see it, even though I saw an extended trailer of it and preparing for this. But I'm interested in seeing that. That's got to be interesting. Now that I know that he was also a director on The Chappelle Show and, all these other things that Rusty Cundiff has done. So that sounds awesome.
Oh,
the book also goes.
Young did the score for the movie too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's pretty cool. I had no idea. I'm gonna see if I can find that score somewhere and listen to it.
It's a lot of kind of organy music because it takes place in that mortuary.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. They also, in the book, they talk about black horror in the movies. They talk about movies like Drums of Voodoo, Son of Ingagi. Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce this. I never saw it. It's 1939.
30s and 40s movies.
I did see Blackenstein and Blackula.
Yeah.
I did see those movies, and they're pretty fun. They're pretty good movies.
I've seen, like, I think I've seen Dolomite, like, for those black exploitation movies. But I never. Oh, yeah. But I don't think I've seen any of the horror ones.
Oh, Rudy Ray Moore movies. I've seen a lot of those, and I've listened to some of his albums, music albums and stuff. I'm a big Rudy Ray Moore fan. He played Dolomite.
Oh.
He also played Disco Godfather. So that's another awesome movie. Most of it takes place in like this disco where people roller skate and dance and stuff, and there's disco music playing. Oh, wow. It's just amazing. If you get a chance, find Disco Godfather.
Yeah.
It's really good. But, some of these horror movies I haven't seen. But basically, yes, I think that it's interesting that Clive talks about these movies and that he picked black horror for his L is for lynching. I wonder if he was listening to a lot of rap music back then.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, that was an interesting pick, and it sort of opened up an area that I didn't have a lot of experience with, so it's kind of neat.
Yeah, if this was you, what would you have picked for the L letter in horror for you? And you can take your time because we can cut this pause out if you want.
Yeah, I suppose if this were. If you kind of go by what the rest of the book is like, maybe it would have been, I don't know, like David Lynch or...
L is for Lynch. I could see that.
Or...
L is for Lucifer. It could be that, too.
Yeah, that would... But I think they already had Devil Rides Out and...
Right.
Yeah. But, Devil Rides Out was really specific, though. That was about Wheatley, right? Dennis Wheatley.
Yeah. Well, you could come up with something like L is for Lost Soul, and then you could do a whole bunch of, like, movies you could talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lynch Mob is sort of, is not exactly in parity with what this chapter is about. Because it's not all about lynch mobs. I mean, it's more about African-American culture and horror.
Yeah, that's true. One of the reasons that it says here, one of the reasons why they call themselves Gravediggers, the rap group, was because he said we were all people who were buried in our careers were buried, and we kind of had to dug out. And then he also says something like we wanted to dig people out of their dead culture and kind of get them in touch with like. Let me see if I can find the exact quote here real quick. Where is that? It says here, when I sit out there and look at these people in the ghetto, says the Grim Reaper, all these mentally dead people, I'm not happy. Know what I'm saying? the theme is like the nastiness, the real dark side of life. And this is from one of the gravediggers whose name was Grim Reaper, spelled with a Y. So, yeah. Feeding off of everyday situations and showing you the horror of everyday life. And when you look back, and I'm saying this as a European, but I'm living in America because I like this country and I like the people in it, obviously. But it's like having lived outside of America for like 35 years of my life, America has a history of violence that other countries don't really have to that deep, subconscious aspect of their cultural life. And in America, you have movies, Western movies, you have cowboys versus Indians. Yeah. That's what you get, fed when you're a kid. And, all the violence that the conquest of the West caused. And then, you have, violence, the Civil War, and then you have, racism. And it's just there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get this violence out of the culture. And
I suppose that compared to European countries, European countries are just as violent, but you just have to go back a lot farther in history.
I guess
the United States is a young country that's been violent for pretty much all of its life.
Yeah, because starting in 1776. But before that, there were obviously the colonists. It was a colony. Yeah. And you just hear these stories about how hard life was in this continent. Kind of hard to imagine now, because right now you hear about the Donner Party, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no, they went and they had to, eat dead people or whatever, and they all died in the cold. And it's like nowadays you can just drive through those mountains in a couple of hours, and you're like, all right, I just got my air conditioning, I got my bottle of water, I got my jerky, and it's like, those poor guys. The conquest was a real active conquest of the American continent, and especially in this country, because I'm looking out of my townhome in Arizona, which is supposed to be a desert right here, and I'm looking out and I'm seeing mallard ducks floating in a pond, trees everywhere. Like basically Arizona has been terraformed by Americans. I live in Chandler, so a lovely place to live in, but it's amazing to see all of the vegetation that people have built in the residential areas in Arizona. And, so I guess I got a little lost there. But my point was that, like you said, obviously we're talking about the Grand Guignol in France, a place that up until a big part of the 20th century still had guillotine executions. There's a lot of violence there, too. I mean, obviously their war where they overthrew the aristocrats was called the Great Horror, right? Yeah. Because people were being killed left and right. People were being beheaded in the public square, and people were cheering, "Yay!" Marie Antoinette lost her head that way.
Well, and I think about how our life is comfortable, and that we're sort of being propped up by our technology, kind of like this, Tetsuo the Iron Man, right? I mean, like I live in a place where it can be like 40 or 50 below in the wintertime. And we rely on a heating system. There's an oil-fired boiler, and there's a little tiny plastic coupler. And if that little plastic coupler in the boiler breaks, the whole boiler shuts down. Now you've got 40 below weather. If there was some kind of apocalypse or whatever, how long am I going to last up here?
Well,
you got to get
depends.
That thing checked like every couple of years.
Yeah, well, you and I live in different extremes. I mean, in Arizona here in the summer it gets to 120. Yeah. You don't want to be outside when it's 120. You don't want to go anywhere when it's 120. And most important, you don't want to be lost in a place where it's 120 because you could die really quickly. I guess if there was a zombie apocalypse, you'd have an advantage because they would freeze in Alaska, so they wouldn't be moving.
Right. Yeah. If we didn't have our heat and water, then we would be in big trouble.
Well, that's what they say, that civilization is just a couple of hot meals away from being turned into barbarians, right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as people don't have power for like a few days and they don't have water, they don't have food, people start. You remember Katrina? There were like people with guns and trucks looting things in the middle of Katrina because it's like, I'm going to shoot you if you don't let me break this window and get some water. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. I guess I can dream for a future where mankind realizes that we don't have to fight. We don't have to kill other people.
Yeah.
And horror should be like more of like getting to terms with who you are and the dark secrets inside you, and not so much physical horror where it's like you're just dismembering someone or, Japanese movies. There's this series of Japanese films that are basically fake snuff movies. One of them, I forgot the name of it. It's like Blood Angel or something. It's basically the whole movie is just a woman being dismembered by a guy.
Oh.
And it's obviously a fake movie, but it's like that's basically the premise of the film. A woman is kidnapped and then she's being dismembered, and they show like the guy cutting off one finger and then cutting off another finger. And it's like that's the kind of thing that's like, is that serving a purpose really? Is that really serving some sort of catharsis? Like when people play, Call of Duty games and they just shoot other players all day. Is that really something that is healthy? I don't know. I mean, I never really got that much into it, but I guess after a while, it has to have some sort of effect on you, right? It has to desensitize you somewhat.
Yeah, that was always my mom's argument, about watching horror movies and violent action movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it has to be contextualized in the way that, what's your experience like? Are you watching it because you like the art aspect of it? Mm-hmm. Or are you watching it because it's kind of like it's turning you on or something? If it's turning you on, then there's something wrong there, right? Yeah. But if you're seeing Hellraiser and you're like, wow, I really want to discuss this movie and discuss the philosophical aspects of it and discuss the relationship aspects of it and, the Faustian story model, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. That's different. You're getting a different kind of intellectual stimulation off the movie. But when it's some, the other side of enjoying horror, the side that says, oh, yeah, man, look at all that blood. Oh, wow. I don't know to some extent if that doesn't border on something that you probably shouldn't be encouraging. But that's just my opinion.
I wonder if it's like eating spicy food where, you start with sort of you start out sort of, you eat something spicy and it's hot, but then the next time you can go a little bit hotter, and then the next time a little bit hotter because your taste buds are sort of getting burned out, and eventually you need to drown your food in hot sauce to have any kind of are people getting desensitized to violence in that same way? Do they say, well, yeah, I saw the Blair Witch Project, but now I need to see Saw or Hostel
or the Human Centipede or a Serbian film?
Yeah. How I don't understand the Human Centipede. Like, why would anybody want to see that? I mean, that's just...
I saw it, to be honest. I did see it. Yeah. I didn't think it was a very good movie. There's really no story to it. It's just gratuitous.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, hey, what if someone did this? Hey, I'm going to do it. All right. Yeah. Well, he did it. So did you add something to, like, the cultural life of movies? I don't think so. It's just there. And then he made another one. So I don't know. But like you said, you can start having just a little bit of pepper on your food, on your salad, then you put some Tabasco on your eggs. Yeah. Next thing you know, you're getting ghost pepper sauce on your wings. Yeah. And that's when you have to buy Chipotle way to clean the blood stains off your underwear. Right. South Park reference. But it's not good for you. It's not. I mean, if you have it in moderation, that's one thing. If you have too much of it, it'll wreck you up. So, as everything.
Yeah.
Remember the Buddha. Take the middle path.
Oh, that reminds me, actually, you had talked about seeing The Expanse. And I watched the whole first season of that.
Okay.
It's good.
Did you like it?
Yeah. There are some, I mean, it's really intense, and there are some, like, scenes of just violence that sort of comes out of nowhere. I mean, it serves the story, but it's like, there was that one guy that was the doctor. Mm-hmm. You know that scene that I'm talking about, and stuff starts exploding, and all of a sudden, like, that thing hits his head, and
right. Yeah.
And I thought, because that was an actor that I recognized, I thought he was pretty safe. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like, I've seen this guy in movies and stuff, and so I think he's going to be around for a while because he seems he seems like a pretty well established, recognizable actor. It's like, nope.
One of the funny things about the show is that the good guys in the show, the guys that we kind of follow their story, one of them is actually supposed to be kind of like a little bit like he doesn't have a concept of good or evil. He's like completely immoral. And he kind of relies on one of his like close friends to kind of be his moral compass.
Yeah,
but sometimes he goes off the rails.
Guy.
Yeah, well, not that one. It's another guy. It's called Amos.
Oh,
Amos. In the show, he's the guy who's always around Naomi, the big strong guy.
Oh yes, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
You're gonna see as the show progresses, he starts getting a little bit more off the rails because the whole team starts doing difficult choices and they start doing more violent choices here and there, and so he kind of starts going a little more off the rails.
He always pushes for the easiest thing where you have to, if you just kill this so and so, then everything will be fine.
Yeah, and he just has this few moments where he almost beats a guy to death with like a chicken can. Wow. It's like, where does that come from? And then you by that time you should have realized that there's something wrong with him. He's kind of like not a psychopath, but he's like a sociopath. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a concept of good or evil, but he wants to do the good thing. That's the important part of his character, that he wants to look at what other people that he considers good do and help them do it.
Yeah.
But he's afraid if he makes choices on his own that he's not going to do the right choice. So I think it's a really good show, really well written. And I have the first book, so I haven't finished the first book yet. But
it's based on a book series?
Yeah, it's based on a book series written by two guys under a single pseudonym.
Oh.
And I think they have 5 or 6 books now. Oh. I only have the first one. So, yeah, hopefully that show will be around for a while. I think they renewed it for a 3rd season.
Wow. It's for the Sci-Fi Channel, it's got seems like a really high production standard.
It is. It's also very expensive for them. So I don't know. It's the future of it is kind of shaky. But I think that they said they were going to do at least a 3rd season and see how that goes. That's the problem with TV adaptations, right? Is that every single episode has to cost like maybe $2-3 million or something. Mm-hmm. And so a channel can only do so much until they say, well, it's not getting the ratings anymore. We're going to have to cancel it. Yeah. But then it's like, there's 6 books to go through. Imagine if Game of Thrones said we're going to cancel it because we're not making enough money, right?
Yeah.
Or not enough people are watching it. I don't think that's going to be a problem ever, but
yeah. Well, and with HBO, do they even know like how many people are watching? All they care about is that they get more subscribers.
Yeah, they know how many people are watching it, except for the piracy, of course.
Yeah.
But they know. They just don't say it. They don't release any sort of like numbers. Mm. And that's also especially true for Netflix. Netflix also doesn't release any numbers or ratings or anything. So they just use that internally.
And bringing this back around to Clive Barker, I hope that, Great and Secret Show or Magica or
Weave World.
Weave World. I hope that those TV series, get done in a way that's really faithful to the original books and takes their time to get the story right and doesn't shy away from violence because it's on like a major network or whatever. I kind of hope that they go.
I would like that.
I hope that they go to cable.
I would like that. As everything nowadays, it seems that everything that has to do with movies has become more like an investment. It's just all about the investment. So it's like the producers never want to take any chances or risks like they did in the 90s. I mean, if someone today came over and said, I want to do a movie with a leprechaun that goes into like a black neighborhood and it's going to be a dark comedy. It's going to be Leprechaun in the Hood. Yeah. People would say, get out of here, man. I don't want to make that movie.
They have intentionally campy, like Sharknado and all this stuff on the Sci-Fi Channel. And like,
well, yeah, that's true.
Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus or Shark.
That's a Roger Corman production.
Yeah, those kind of things. I mean, I think that people like that because it's campy and it's like we were talking about earlier, right? A premise-based movie like Human Centipede. It's like, what if? You know, and then you take like these crazy like toddler ideas and cram them together, and what if that happened?
I've seen all the Sharknado movies, and that not for a moment do they ever question why are sharks inside a tornado. They just go with it. It's like something that happens.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, you see people from like the Today Show, like Al Roker talking about the weather, and we're going to have a Sharknado come in, and it's going to join with this Sharknado. It's going to make a Sharknado front. And it's like, oh, my God, this is so awesome.
Oh,
and then Ann Coulter shows up.
I haven't
but,
seen
you know.
any of them. I haven't seen any of the sequels.
I've seen all of them, and the next one is coming up. They're just doing something on Facebook the other day saying, help us name the 5th Sharknado or whatever it is. So, those are really campy, though. But like I said, movies are just becoming an investment, and it's like attach the names people will recognize or use intellectual properties that people already know and follow. That's a sure thing for them to make money, even if it's going to suck. Yeah. You know, even if it's going to be like, oh, let's make another Purge movie, or let's make a movie called World War Z with Brad Pitt, because people know Brad Pitt and they know the title World War Z, and then let's not make anything like the book. So, World War Z fans out there are incensed when World War Z, the movie with Brad Pitt, came out, because there was like, this is nothing like the movie. They just used the title. It's nothing like the movie, the book. Yeah. And now they're going to do a second one. So, okay, I guess.
And I think it was Max Brooks that wrote that, right? And he's like the son of Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
And he in an interview, I think he had said, like, you know, I wrote a script for that and they ignored it. And he said, you know, this movie, you know, maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but I had nothing to do with it.
Another thing that's been on the topic of horror and TV shows and stuff, and it's like The Walking Dead. I mean, I gave up on The Walking Dead around the 3rd season. I just kind of like thought to myself, I don't think this is really going anywhere. This is just going to be them constantly slogging against either people who try to kill them or try to take their things or zombies. And it's never going to have any sort of resolution. So I just kind of gave up on it.
That's how I felt, too. I started getting upset, you know, at the, you know, it's just like this never-ending onslaught, you know, and they've got children, and I don't know, it just, there was one episode where a guy, maybe you didn't see this far, but where a guy was out walking around outside of the place where they were hanging out, and then these people kidnapped him and hit him in the head, and then they took him, and when he woke up, they had cut off part of his leg, and they were eating it in front of him.
Oh my God, that's terrible. Like, yeah.
And I think they were trying to give it to him, and I'm like, I just shut it off. And I said, you know, I don't think I'm ever going to watch this show again.
Yeah, and there was a new season that came out some time ago that introduced that character that has like a baseball bat with like barbed wire.
There's all kinds of like, memes and stuff about him, but I don't.
Oh, and there were a bunch of articles about how some people were saying, I'm done with it, you know, after they killed another, like, beloved character that had been in the show for a long time.
I forget what his name is, the Asian guy, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to spoil it because there's a lot of Walking Dead fans out there.
I haven't even seen it, but it got, you know, I know that much just because of all of this crap I see on Facebook.
Yeah, but about this horror thing, some people just thought it went too far, and they just kind of were giving up on Walking Dead. And then the show rating was starting to go down, the show's ratings, because some people were like, I just don't, you know, is this going anywhere? Like, why is all this violence? It's like, I'm just done with it. It's just too much. And in that sense, it kind of goes towards this A through Z of horror that sometimes violence is good in small portions, right? Movie violence is good in small portions. But once it's always in every single episode, it just kind of wears you down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, you know, kill off half of their people, and then they meet some new people, and then you kill off more of those people. Then they meet some new people, and then they're never going towards hope or towards a better life. Or if they are, it turns out that it's fake, you know, or that it's the place that they're going is dangerous.
But I really hope that these shows that Clive Barker is trying to get off the ground will eventually get made, because if there's a medium that's like a writer's medium, it's TV. So movies are like a director's medium or an actor's medium or whatever, but TV is where the writers really shine.
Yeah.
That's where you get stuff like Twilight Zone and all those like shows that had great writing, even though the production may have been, just regular, nothing truly impressive, like a Ridley Scott movie where you have all this stuff created and all these sets built and all that. But then, the story may not be the best.
And nowadays, serialized dramas are huge. And it used to be that they would make these encapsulated episodes that didn't really have much to do with each other so that you could watch them in whatever order you wanted. Or if one day happened to be a rerun, it didn't really matter that much.
I miss that.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, you would see like episodes like MacGyver or The A-Team or even other shows that, Fame, shows from the 80s. Yeah. Those shows, every single show was like a tiny movie that had like 2 or 3 subplots going on. And they all started and ended. Yeah. And they all started and ending inside the same episode. There may have been some that went through like 1 or 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But mostly those episodes were just stories that started and ended in the episode. And nowadays you have to watch the whole season. You have to binge the whole thing to be able to know where it's going. And, another reason why I gave up on Lost was because I thought the show was not going anywhere. It just kept on going.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm done. I mean, if the mystery is just that it's a mystery, then there's not going to be any sort of resolution to it. I'm done. We need some sort of like.
It just gets more confusing instead of less confusing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I feel like my age is showing in this episode because I feel like I'm an old man ranting about things. In my days back 30 years ago, TV shows used to be much better.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I tried to watch The Great American Hero again, and it was not watchable. It was It was so bad. And I used to love that show when I was a kid.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I used to love watching The Knight Rider when I was a kid, and then I watched an episode of it, and I was like, oh, my God, this is so cheesy. I can't even
yeah, I know.
I can't watch this anymore. And they tried bringing it back like a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And it didn't go anywhere. I think they canceled it after like a season or something.
Yeah.
So,
or Airwolf. Jennifer and I tried to watch Airwolf, too, and because she loved that show when she was a kid, and we watched it, and we're like, an hour, because the first pilot episode was like 2 hours long, and we're like an hour into it, and we're looking at each other like, can we turn this off now? This is boring.
Yeah. I had never seen that show. I mean, you have to consider that I have different cultural references than Americans do. But even though I saw a lot of American stuff, some stuff didn't really make it popular across the Atlantic.
Airwolf
I do remember like a show.
A helicopter that they kept inside of an active volcano, and then they would fly out and shoot other helicopters down and stuff.
What live action?
Yeah. I mean, but they just reused footage all the time.
Okay. I mean, I used to watch a show with a helicopter. It's called Blue Thunder. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, really similar.
But then I saw some episodes of it recently again, and I was like, it's okay. Yeah. It's just like the A-Team. I mean, I have to be in a very particular mindset to enjoy an episode of the A-Team because the stories turn into this kind of formula, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They get into a warehouse with their van, and they have to. Yeah. And they've got all these tools, and they have to weld crap onto their van so that they can break out and go fight.
And Mr. T has to get on the plane, but he doesn't like to fly, so they're going to have to drug him somehow. And then there's going to. And then Murdoch is in a crazy, he's in a asylum, and they have to break him out somehow. And it's always the same thing. It always keeps happening. So, yeah, you kind of see through that. Maybe we watch these shows when we're kids, so we don't know any better, and it kind of helps our enjoyment of it. And then when we're grown up and we have, a different approach to the stories and we know how these things are written, then it's like, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, and under the old model, I mean, if you miss an episode of The Expanse, it's like you don't know what's going on. You have to watch all of it together.
And that is true. That is true. That's a very complex story.
Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes you want to have a complex story that kind of challenges you, that kind of a deep story where you're like, wow, I see now that they set this up and now we're getting the payoff, and it took like a few things, but, we got there. Yeah. Sometimes it's cool to have a complex story where, you have to struggle a little bit to keep up. yeah, I like that too.
We haven't heard any
I don't need
about Clive Barker TV series in quite a while.
Yeah, I know. If anybody has any news out there that you can share with us, please send us a message.
Yeah, I know. On the one hand, I'm anxious about it. I want to see, I'm excited about it. On the other hand, I'm scared too.
Yeah, when I was hearing about Weave World, and it was like
the app developer and the pastry chef.
Developer and a pastry chef, and there's a portal in a house. I'm like, that's not what Weave World is about. Luckily, the people at Seraphim told us, nah, forget that story. That's not, they were just trying to make it, and, we didn't have anything to do with it and whatever. Yeah. And it's like, okay. But then it's like, all right, so what's going on? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, remember Saint Sinner, same thing. Yeah. They only use the title, basically. So anyway, let's see. Let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Yeah. As usual, it's all about the money, It's all about the money. I wish I could win the Powerball jackpot and, become a producer. Right, yeah. And then it's like, okay, forget Raven Banner. It's going to be Gisele Tao is funding Jacqueline S. for Will. Yeah, but then after a while you have to consider, wait, am I getting my money's worth out of this? Am I going to get a refund? Yeah. So I understand where producers come from sometimes. They're probably thinking, hey, this is more like it's less. Let's throw money at this artist so he can make like a vision, and nowadays it's more like let's throw money at this guy so he can make a movie and give me a profit back. Yeah, that's what it is, and then they get involved in the process and they go like, well, instead of doing that, why don't you do this because it'll reach a wider demographic? Oh, and instead of this character being white or black, why not make him purple? And then it's like, oh, and and then after a while they make the show and it's a completely different story. Yeah, and you ask yourself, this why? This character should be hot, and like a 20-year-old. Yeah, and it's like, oh, we can't afford a big set, so you're going to have to, you're going to have to cut down on this sequence here, or you're going to have to throw this one out, or we don't have money for CGI or this or that. Yeah. And it's like at that point, it just becomes a mediocre monument to compromise, right? Yeah. So at that point, why do it? It's just going to be a compromised vision just to make money. So I don't know. I mean, that sounded pessimistic. I didn't want to end on that note, but hey, let's hope for the best. Well, and getting back to the A through Z of horror, if you want to see the episodes that we talked about today, both J and K are on episode 4. So we've got a link in the show notes over at clivebarkercast.com. You can just click on the playlist and go to episode 4, and you'll be able to see J and K, and then L is not an episode, so J for Japan and K for Killing Joke. Coming up next, we'll be talking about the body book. We'll do more A through Z of horror and a Gods and Monsters commentary. And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. You can find the show notes for this page and lots of Clive Barker news and features at www.clivebarkercast.com. Leave comments there or get them directly into the podcast by clicking the Send Voicemail tab on the right. Please follow us on Twitter at BarkerCast or at Occupy Midian. Like us on Facebook and join the Occupy Midian Facebook group. You can listen on the site or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, TuneIn, Pocket Cast, Google Play, and Double Twist. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Please take a couple of minutes to leave us a review on iTunes. It means the world to us and helps us spread the word about Clive Barker. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.
Okay, and I'll just...
Gosh, we really talked a lot today.
I know we did.